She told me her ex was her past. Then I found his jacket in our closet. My name is Luke Mathers, and I'm a contractor in Pine Ridge, Maine. Not the kind of guy who looks for trouble, but not the kind who runs from it either. I build houses, fix foundations, and solve problems with my hands. Simple life, or so I thought. Sierra and I had been married for 8 years. She worked in HR at TechFlow Solutions, one of those companies that sprouted up in our little town when the state started offering tax incentives. Smart woman, organized, always knew what to say and when to say it. That should have been my first warning. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. Sierra was at another mandatory team building retreat in Portland. Third one this quarter, which seemed excessive even for a company obsessed with synergy and workplace culture. I was in the bedroom hanging up laundry when I pushed aside her dresses to make room for my work shirts. That's when I saw it. A leather jacket, brown with brass zippers, hanging behind her summer dresses like it belonged there. Wrong size for me. Too narrow in the shoulders, too long in the arms. Wrong brand, too. I wore Carhartt and Dickies, practical stuff that could survive a construction site. This was some designer nonsense with Italian labels and soft leather that had never seen an honest day's work. I pulled it out, examining it under the bedroom light. The leather still smelled new, expensive. In the inside pocket, I found a receipt from Nordstrom dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, when Sierra claimed she was working late every night on the quarterly budget review. My hands weren't shaking. I'm not that kind of man. But something cold settled in my stomach as I recognized the jacket. I'd seen it before, in photographs Sierra swore she'd deleted years ago. Photographs of her with Gavin Pierce, her college boyfriend who supposedly belonged to ancient history. Gavin Pierce. Even his name sounded entitled. Sales director at Sierra's company, Golden Boy, who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sierra always insisted their relationship ended badly, that they could barely stand to work in the same building. Professional courtesy only, she'd say whenever his name came up. He's my past, Luke. You're my future. Apparently, the past had expensive taste in outerwear. I hung the jacket back where I found it and continued with the laundry, but my mind was racing. 3 weeks ago, Sierra started working late more often. 3 weeks ago, she bought new lingerie and claimed it was for confidence at work. 3 weeks ago, she started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered. The pieces weren't just falling into place, they were slamming together like freight trains. I went downstairs to my workshop in the garage, where I do my best thinking. Surrounded by tools and sawhorses, the smell of wood stain and motor oil, I tried to make sense of what I'd found. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Gavin left it there years ago and Sierra forgot about it. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But contractors don't survive by ignoring structural problems, and this felt like a foundation crack that went all the way to bedrock. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Sierra's social media. She was careful, I'd give her that. No obvious photos with Gavin, no suspicious comments or likes. But I noticed something else. Photos from company events where Gavin appeared in the background, always wearing that same brown leather jacket. The jacket hanging in our closet. My phone buzzed with a text from Sierra. Retreat running late. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, Love you too. Drive safe. But I wasn't feeling love anymore. I was feeling something else entirely. Something that made me want to take a sledgehammer to the wall and see what other surprises were hiding in the structure of my marriage. Instead, I went back upstairs and conducted a more thorough investigation. Behind Sierra's jewelry box, I found a phone charger that didn't fit any device we owned. In her coat pocket, a hotel keycard from the Eastland Park in Portland, dated from her last retreat. Under our bathroom sink, a bottle of men's cologne, expensive stuff that made my Old Spice look like industrial solvent. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin of my trust, Another piece of evidence that my wife had been living a double life. But I'm a methodical man, and I needed more than circumstantial evidence before I made my next move. I set up a small camera in our bedroom closet, hidden behind a shoebox where Sierra kept her old running shoes. Nothing fancy, just a basic security camera I used on job sites to prevent tool theft. If Gavin was coming to our house, if he was comfortable enough to leave his jacket in our closet, then I wanted proof. The camera had motion detection and sent alerts to my phone. All I had to do was wait. Sierra came home the next morning with coffee and pastries from that expensive bakery downtown, the one she only visited when she felt guilty about something. She kissed my cheek and asked about my day, playing the perfect wife while her lover's jacket hung 10 feet away in our bedroom closet. "How was the retreat?" I asked, accepting the coffee and hating myself for pretending everything was normal. Productive but exhausting. You know how these corporate things are. Lots of talking, not much actual work getting done. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm just glad to be home. Home. Our home, where she'd been entertaining another man while I worked 60-hour weeks to pay the mortgage. "Did you work with Gavin on any of the team-building exercises?" I kept my voice casual, like I was making conversation. Sierra's smile flickered for just a moment. "A little. He's actually not as insufferable as I used to think. More professional now, you know? We're both adults." Adults, right. That afternoon, while Sierra was at the grocery store, my phone buzzed with an alert from the closet camera. Someone was in our bedroom. I opened the app and watched Sierra move around the room, but she wasn't alone. A man's voice came through the audio, muffled but unmistakable. "You sure you won't be back early?" "Luke's at the Morrison site until 6. We have time." I watched my wife pull the brown leather jacket from the closet and hand it to someone just outside the camera's range. Then she moved closer to the closet, reaching for something on the top shelf, and I got a clear view of Gavin Pierce standing in my bedroom buttoning his shirt. They weren't just having an affair. They were comfortable enough to conduct it in my house, in my bedroom, while I was breaking my back to provide for us. The disrespect was breathtaking, but what really got to me was how natural they looked together, like they'd been doing this for years. Maybe they had been. I turned off the camera feed and sat in my truck outside the Morrison site staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to drive home and confront them immediately, but that would be emotional, reactive. I'm not that kind of man. When I tear down a structure, I plan it carefully. I make sure it falls exactly where I want it to fall, and I make sure nothing I want to keep gets damaged in the process. This situation required the same approach. That evening, Sierra was unusually affectionate, cooking my favorite dinner and asking about my work projects. Guilt makes some people confess. It makes others overcompensate. Sierra was definitely in the second category. "I've been thinking," she said over dessert. "Maybe we should plan a vacation, somewhere warm, just the two of us. We haven't had quality time together in months." Quality time. While she was having quality time with Gavin in our bedroom. "That sounds nice," I said. "Where were you thinking?" "Maybe the Caribbean or Florida, somewhere we can just relax and reconnect." Reconnect. The irony was almost funny. "I'll look into it," I promised, and Sierra beamed like I'd just offered to buy her the moon. Later that night, after Sierra fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. I could confront her privately, demand an explanation, maybe salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But Sierra was an HR professional. She knew how to manage difficult conversations, how to deflect and redirect and make the other person feel like they were overreacting. No, a private confrontation would just give her time to prepare her defenses, maybe even turn the situation around and make me the villain. She'd done it before, during smaller arguments, making me feel unreasonable for questioning her late nights or suspicious behavior. This time would be different. This time, I would control the narrative. The family dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday. Both sets of parents would be there, along with Sierra's sister Jennifer and her husband. Sierra had been planning it for weeks, one of those elaborate meals she used to demonstrate what a perfect wife and hostess she was. Perfect timing. I spent the week gathering more evidence, building an airtight case. The closet camera captured 2 more visits from Gavin, including one where they spent an hour in our bed while I was supposedly at a job site in Bangor. I'd actually driven halfway there before turning around, suspicious about Sierra's eagerness for me to take that particular contract. My phone was full of photos and video clips, a digital record of my wife's betrayal, but I wanted more than just proof of the affair. I wanted to understand how deep this went, how many people knew, how long I'd been the fool in this situation. That's when I decided to talk to Mrs. Dunning. Ethel Dunning lived next door and had been the neighborhood watch coordinator for 15 years. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge, and she had opinions about everything. Most people found her nosy and irritating. I found her extremely useful. "Luke," she called out Thursday evening as I was checking the mail. "How's that lovely wife of yours?" "She's great, Mrs. Dunning. Working hard, you know how it is." Mrs. Dunning nodded knowingly. "Oh yes, I see her coming and going at all hours. Very dedicated. And that young man who visits sometimes, is he helping with work projects?" My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Young man? Tall fellow, drives that fancy blue car. Very well dressed. I've seen him a few times when you're not home. I assumed he was a colleague or something." "Ah, yes," I said carefully. "Probably someone from her office. They collaborate on projects sometimes." "I'm sure they do," Mrs. Dunning said with a meaningful look. "He seems very collaborative." The way she emphasized the word told me everything I needed to know. Mrs. Dunning had seen more than she was saying, and she was giving me the opportunity to ask the right questions. "How long have you been seeing him around?" I asked. "Oh, months now. Maybe since spring. I only noticed because of the car. You don't see many BMWs in this neighborhood. And he always parks in your driveway like he belongs there." Months. Since spring. Sierra and I had been having problems since spring, little arguments about money and time and priorities that I'd attributed to work stress. Apparently, the stress had a name. "Well, I appreciate you keeping an eye on things," I told Mrs. Dunning. "It's nice to know the neighborhood is in good hands." She smiled, pleased with the compliment. "Oh, I don't mind. We all have to look out for each other, don't we?" Friday night, I made my final preparations. I moved the brown leather jacket from the closet to the coat rack by the front door, where everyone would see it when they arrived for dinner. Then I printed out several photos from the closet camera, nothing explicit, just clear images of Gavin in our bedroom, timestamps visible. I also prepared a few conversation starters, questions designed to make Sierra uncomfortable and reveal the truth to our families. I wasn't planning to humiliate her, not yet, but I wanted everyone to understand what kind of person she really was. Sierra spent Saturday morning cooking and cleaning, transforming our house into the perfect setting for family dinner. She was excited, energetic, completely unaware that she was preparing for her own trial. "Could you set up the dining room?" she asked around noon. "I want everything to look perfect." "Of course," I said. "Anything for my perfect wife." She smiled and kissed my cheek, still playing her role. I wondered if she ever felt guilty, or if lying had become so natural that she didn't even think about it anymore. The first guests arrived at 4, Sierra's parents, Robert and Linda Hartwell. Robert was a retired bank manager, Linda a former elementary school teacher. Conservative, traditional people who valued appearances and social standing above almost everything else. They'd always been polite to me, but never quite warm, like they thought Sierra could have done better. Today, they were about to find out exactly what their daughter had been doing. "Luke," Robert shook my hand with his usual firm grip. "House looks great. You've been keeping busy." "Always something to fix," I replied. "You know how it is." Linda hugged Sierra and immediately started fussing over the dinner preparations, offering to help in that way that wasn't really offering. She noticed the leather jacket on the coat rack immediately. "Whose jacket is that?" she asked. "It's very nice." Sierra glanced over, and her face went pale. She'd forgotten about the jacket, hadn't noticed I'd moved it. "Oh, that's—" she started, then caught herself. "That's Luke's. New one." "Really?" Linda examined it more closely. "It doesn't look like your usual style, Luke." "I'm trying to upgrade my wardrobe," I said smoothly. "Sierra's been encouraging me to dress better for client meetings." Sierra shot me a grateful look, thinking I was covering for her. She had no idea I was setting the stage. My parents arrived next, Tom and Margaret Mathers, both retired from the paper mill, down-to-earth people who'd worked hard their whole lives and didn't have patience for nonsense. They liked Sierra well enough, but they'd raised me to value honesty above everything else. Jennifer and her husband Mike rounded out the group. Jennifer was 2 years younger than Sierra, a nurse practitioner with 3 kids and no time for drama. She and Sierra had always been competitive, and Jennifer had never quite bought into Sierra's perfect wife act. We gathered in the living room for appetizers and small talk. Sierra was in her element, playing hostess, making sure everyone had drinks and felt welcome. She was good at it. I had to give her that. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd be proud of her. "So, Luke," Robert said, settling into his favorite chair, "how's business? I heard construction is booming around here." "Can't complain. Lots of new development, renovations. People want to upgrade their homes." "Speaking of upgrades," Linda said, "Sierra mentioned you might be planning a vacation." Sierra beamed. "We're thinking about the Caribbean. Luke works so hard. He deserves a break." "That sounds wonderful," Margaret said. "You both work such long hours. It's important to make time for each other." The irony was suffocating, but I maintained my smile. Sierra's been working especially hard lately. Lots of late nights, weekend retreats, very dedicated to her career. "Oh yes," Linda said proudly. "Sierra's always been ambitious. Even in college, she was involved in everything, dating that nice boy. What was his name?" "Gavin," Sierra said quickly. "But that was a long time ago, Mom." "Of course, dear. Ancient history." I caught Jennifer's eye and saw something flicker there. Recognition, maybe suspicion. Jennifer was sharp, and she'd always been able to read her sister better than anyone else. "Isn't Gavin the one who works at your company now?" Jennifer asked innocently. Sierra's smile tightened. "Yes, but we're completely professional. It's not like we're friends or anything." "That must be awkward," Mike said. "Working with an ex." "Not really," Sierra replied. "We're both adults. We've moved on." I decided it was time to start applying pressure. "Actually," I said casually, "didn't you work with Gavin on that team-building retreat last week?" Everyone turned to look at Sierra, who was suddenly very interested in her wine glass. "A little," she admitted. "But it was all work-related, group exercises, that sort of thing." "Team building?" Robert nodded approvingly. "Very important for workplace efficiency. I always encouraged that sort of thing at the bank." "Yes," I said. "Sierra's always been very good at collaboration." Jennifer's eyebrows went up slightly. She was definitely picking up on something. "Well," Linda said, "I think it shows maturity that you can work together professionally despite your history. Not everyone could handle that." "Sierra's very mature," I agreed. "Very good at keeping her personal and professional lives separate." The conversation continued, but I could see Sierra growing more uncomfortable. She kept glancing at the jacket on the coat rack, probably wondering when Gavin would realize he'd left it behind, probably panicking about how to explain its presence to our families. At 6 o'clock, Sierra announced that dinner was ready. We moved to the dining room where she'd set the table with our wedding china and the good silverware. Everything looked perfect, just like she'd planned. She had no idea that perfection was about to shatter. We were halfway through the main course when I decided to drop the bomb. The conversation had been flowing smoothly. Work, weather, local politics, all the safe topics that families discuss when they want to avoid conflict. Sierra was relaxed now, thinking she'd navigated the dangerous waters successfully. She was laughing at one of Mike's stories about his latest home improvement disaster, playing the role of supportive sister-in-law. That's when I set down my fork and turned to Robert. "Robert," I said in the same conversational tone I'd been using all evening, "did you know they never really broke up?" The table went silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Wine glasses paused in midair. Even the background music from Sierra's carefully curated playlist seemed to fade away. Robert's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, then something that looked like guilt. Linda's hand froze mid-reach for the breadbasket, her mouth slightly open. "I'm sorry," Robert said carefully. "Sierra and Gavin," I clarified, still keeping my voice level and calm. "They never really broke up, did they?" Sierra was staring at me with wide eyes, her face pale. "Luke, what are you—" "I'm asking your father a simple question," I interrupted gently. "Did you know your daughter never actually ended her relationship with Gavin Pierce?" The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Linda slowly withdrew her hand from the breadbasket and placed it in her lap. Margaret was looking between Sierra and me with growing concern. Tom had that expression he got when he was trying to solve a complex problem. Jennifer was watching her sister with laser focus. "I don't understand what you're implying," Robert said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm not implying anything," I replied. "I'm stating a fact. Sierra has been maintaining a relationship with Gavin Pierce throughout our marriage. The question is whether you knew about it." Linda's face crumpled. She pushed back from the table and stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me," she whispered, and walked quickly toward the bathroom. She didn't come back. Robert was staring at his plate, his jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. The guilt on his face was answer enough, but I wanted to hear him say it. "Robert?" I prompted. "Luke," Sierra said desperately. "Whatever you think you know." "I know about the jacket in our closet," I said calmly. "I know about the hotel keycard from the Eastland Park. I know about the cologne under our bathroom sink and the phone charger that doesn't fit any device we own." Jennifer sucked in a sharp breath. Mike was looking confused, trying to catch up. My parents were staring at Sierra like they'd never seen her before. "I know about the BMW in our driveway when I'm not home," I continued. "I know about the team-building retreats and the mandatory overtime and all the other creative excuses you've been using to explain your absences." Sierra's hands were shaking now. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "What I want to know is who else understood. Who else knew that my wife was living a double life?" Robert finally looked up from his plate, his face haggard. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Dad," Sierra whispered. "We thought it was just a phase," Robert continued, his voice barely audible. "A midlife crisis or something. Linda said it would burn itself out if we didn't interfere." "So you covered for her," I said. It wasn't a question. Robert nodded miserably. "The alibis, the excuses when you called looking for her. We thought we were protecting your marriage by enabling her affair. We thought she would come to her senses." Margaret spoke for the first time since the conversation started. "How long?" she asked quietly. Robert looked at Sierra, who was staring at her plate with tears streaming down her face. "How long?" Margaret repeated, her voice harder. 2 years, Robert whispered. 2 years, not months, years. 2 years of lies, 2 years of deception, 2 years of me working extra hours to pay for vacations and dinners and gifts for a wife who was sharing her bed with another man. Tom was the next to speak, his voice completely quiet. "You knew for 2 years that Luke's wife was cheating on him, and you said nothing." It wasn't our place, Robert started. Like hell it wasn't, Tom snapped. Luke is family. You watched him work himself into the ground trying to make Sierra happy while she was betraying him with your full knowledge. Tom, Margaret warned, but her heart wasn't in it. She was furious, too. Jennifer was staring at her sister with undisguised disgust. Sierra, how could you? You don't understand, Sierra said through her tears. It's complicated. No, I said firmly. It's not complicated. It's simple. You made a choice. Every day for 2 years, you chose to lie to me. Every day for 2 years, you chose him over me. Every day for 2 years, you chose to let me believe we had a marriage worth saving. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor like Linda's had. The only complicated part is figuring out how many people knew I was being made a fool of. Luke, please. Sierra reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Don't, I said. Don't touch me. Don't lie to me anymore. Don't pretend this is something it's not. I walked to the coat rack and grabbed Gavin's jacket, then returned to the dining room and dropped it on the table in front of Sierra's parents. This belongs to your daughter's boyfriend, I said. He left it in our bedroom closet after one of their afternoon meetings. I thought you might want to return it to him, since you're apparently on such good terms. Robert stared at the jacket like it was a venomous snake. I'm going for a drive, I announced. When I get back, I want everyone gone except Sierra. We have things to discuss. Luke, my mother said softly, maybe you should... I'm fine, Mom, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. I just need some air. I walked to the front door, grabbed my keys from the hook, and paused to look back at the dining room. Sierra was sobbing now, ugly tears that smeared her carefully applied makeup. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Jennifer was comforting her husband, who still seemed to be processing what he'd witnessed. My parents were sitting in stunned silence, probably wondering how they'd raised a son who could be so thoroughly deceived. Oh, I said, as if I'd just remembered something important. Sierra, you might want to check your phone. I think Gavin's been trying to reach you. Something about a jacket he can't find. Then I walked out of my own house and drove away, leaving my wife to explain to our families how she'd destroyed 8 years of marriage for a man who bought his clothes at Nordstrom and drove a BMW. The October air was crisp and clean, nothing like the suffocating atmosphere I'd left behind. I drove aimlessly through Pine Ridge, past the high school where Sierra and I had met at a reunion dance, past the church where we'd gotten married, past the real estate office where we'd signed the papers for our house. All of it felt like someone else's life now, someone else's memories. The man who'd believed in happy endings and forever love was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood that trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. My phone buzzed with texts, from Sierra, from my parents, from Jennifer. I ignored them all. There would be time for conversations later, time for explanations and apologies and whatever came next. Right now, I just drove through the gathering darkness, planning my next move and wondering how many other surprises were waiting to be discovered in the ruins of my marriage. The family dinner had served its purpose. Everyone knew the truth now. Sierra's perfect façade had cracked wide open, and there was no putting it back together. But this was just the beginning. I had more evidence, more revelations, more ways to make sure Sierra understood exactly what she'd thrown away. The game was just getting started. I drove for 2 hours before returning home. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen window. All the cars were gone. Our families had fled the wreckage of what was supposed to be a pleasant Saturday dinner. Sierra was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, still wearing her dinner party dress, but looking like she'd been through a hurricane. Her makeup was gone, her hair disheveled, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "We need to talk," she said as soon as I appeared in the doorway. "No," I replied calmly. "We needed to talk 2 years ago. Now we need something else entirely. Luke, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" How you've been having an affair with your ex-boyfriend for 2 years? How your parents have been helping you cover it up? How you've been bringing him into our house, our bedroom, while I was working to pay for the life you wanted? She flinched at each accusation, but didn't deny any of them. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. When Gavin got hired at TechFlow, we were just going to be professional colleagues. But then we started working together on projects, and the old feelings came back. Stop, I said. I don't want to hear about your feelings. I don't want to hear about how it just happened or how you didn't mean for it to go this far. I want you to pack a bag and leave. This is my house too. No, I said firmly. This is the house I've been paying for while you entertained your boyfriend. This is the house you violated. This is the house where you made me look like a fool for 2 years. You don't get to stay here. Sierra started crying again, but they were angry tears now, not the devastated sobs from dinner. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. You had a marriage, I interrupted. You threw that away. Now you have consequences. I went upstairs to our bedroom and pulled out a suitcase, then started filling it with Sierra's clothes. She followed me, pleading and arguing, but I ignored her. When the suitcase was full, I carried it downstairs and set it by the front door. Where am I supposed to go? She demanded. I don't care, I said honestly. Call Gavin, call your parents, call a hotel, but you're not staying here tonight. Luke, please, can't we work this out? Can't we try counseling or something? I stared at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of her deceptions. Sierra, I said gently, if you'd had an affair and confessed, if you'd made a mistake and wanted to fix it, we might have had something to work with. But you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for 2 years, you chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me. You chose to let me believe we had a marriage worth fighting for while you were planning your exit strategy. I wasn't planning an exit strategy. Then what were you planning? To keep both of us forever? To have your stable, reliable husband and your exciting boyfriend? To let me keep working myself to the bone while you played house with Gavin? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Get out, I said. We'll talk about lawyers and divorce papers later. Right now, I just want you gone. Sierra picked up her suitcase, her movements jerky and defeated. At the door, she turned back one more time. I did love you, she said. I still do. No, I replied. You loved what I provided. Security, stability, someone to pay the bills while you figured out what you really wanted. That's not the same thing as loving me. After she left, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what had just happened. 8 years of marriage, gone. The life I'd been building, the future I'd been planning, all of it based on lies. But along with the pain and anger, I felt something else. Relief. The uncertainty was over. The suspicious glances and unanswered questions and nagging doubts, all of it was finished. I knew exactly where I stood now, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. Sunday morning, I called my foreman, Benny, and asked him to meet me at the job site. Benny Martinez was the best construction worker I'd ever hired, reliable, skilled, and absolutely loyal. He was also divorced, courtesy of his ex-wife's gambling problem, so he understood betrayal. Boss, he said when he saw my face, you look like someone ran over your dog. Worse, I said. Someone ran over my marriage. I told him everything, the affair, the family dinner, Sierra's expulsion from the house. Benny listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. 2 years, he said when I finished. She was cheating for 2 years and her parents knew? Apparently. Man, that's cold. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person Sierra Hartwell really is. Benny grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. I'm listening. I need information, I said. About Sierra, about Gavin, about how long this has been going on and who else knows about it. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm dealing with. You want me to ask around? Carefully. I don't want it getting back to them that I'm investigating. Not yet. Benny nodded. My cousin Terry works in IT at TechFlow. He might know something. Perfect. Set up a meeting. That afternoon, I met Terry Martinez at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar on the outskirts of town where construction workers and mill employees went to drink cheap beer and complain about their bosses. Terry was younger than Benny, maybe 25, with the pale complexion and thick glasses of someone who spent his days staring at computer screens. Benny says you need information about some people at TechFlow, he said after we'd ordered drinks. Sierra Hartwell and Gavin Pierce, I confirmed. Anything you can tell me about their relationship? Terry took a long pull from his beer. Man, everyone at the company knows about them. They're not exactly subtle. What do you mean? They disappear together during lunch breaks. They volunteer for the same projects. They go to conferences together and share hotel rooms. Company pays for separate rooms, but they only use one. My jaw tightened. How long has this been going on? Since Gavin got hired, maybe 2.5 years ago. At first, people thought it was just friendly because they had history, you know? But then it became obvious there was more to it. Does anyone else know Sierra's married? Terry laughed bitterly. Oh yeah, everyone knows. That's what makes it so messed up. Sierra talks about her husband all the time, how hard he works, how he's renovating their house, how he's saving up for vacations. Meanwhile, she's hooking up with Gavin in supply closets. Supply closets. The disrespect was breathtaking. Anyone ever say anything to management? Are you kidding? Sierra is management. She's HR, remember? And Gavin's one of their top sales guys. Nobody wants to risk their job calling out the golden couple. Golden couple? That's what people call them behind their backs. They act like they're the king and queen of the office, like they're better than everyone else. Sierra, especially, she talks down to people, acts like she's doing them a favor by acknowledging their existence. This was a side of Sierra I'd never seen, but it made sense. At home, she was sweet and supportive, the perfect wife. At work, where she had power and status, she could afford to show her true colors. What about Gavin? What's his story? Rich kid from Portland. His dad owns a bunch of car dealerships. Gavin thinks he's slumming it working in Pine Ridge, like he's doing us all a favor by gracing us with his presence. He drives that BMW to work every day just to make sure everyone knows he's got money. Is he married? Dating anyone else? Terry shook his head. Not that I know of. I think Sierra's his main thing, but there are rumors he hooks up with other women at conferences and business trips. Guy thinks he's God's gift, you know? So Sierra wasn't just cheating. She was cheating with a man who was probably cheating on her. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. One more question, I said. Does Sierra ever talk about leaving her husband? Terry considered this. Not directly, but she's been asking a lot of questions about divorce lately. How much it costs, how property gets divided, that sort of thing. She's been researching it on company computers. I know because I monitor the network traffic. She's planning to divorce me. Sounds like it. And from what I hear, she thinks she's going to take you for everything you've got. I finished my beer and thanked Terry for the information. He refused to let me pay for his drinks, saying it was the least he could do for someone getting screwed over by the golden couple. Driving home, I processed what I'd learned. Sierra wasn't just having an affair. She was planning her exit strategy, researching divorce proceedings while maintaining the facade of a happy marriage. She was going to blindside me with papers, probably after she'd figured out how to maximize her settlement. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I wasn't the naive, trusting husband anymore. I was a man with evidence, with allies, and with a plan. Sierra thought she was controlling the narrative, but she was about to learn that I could write a much better ending to this story. The game wasn't just getting started, it was about to get very interesting. Monday morning, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of running my own business. I took a personal day. Not because I needed rest, but because I needed to conduct a thorough investigation into my wife's double life. First stop was the Pine Ridge Community Bank, where I met with Janet Morrison, the branch manager who'd handled our accounts for years. Janet was a friend of my mother's, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked her way up from teller to management through sheer competence. "Luke," she said when I walked into her office, "I was sorry to hear about your troubles. Word travels fast in a small town?" Of course it did. The family dinner disaster was probably common knowledge by now. "I need to understand our financial situation," I told her. "All accounts, all transactions, everything Sierra has access to." Janet pulled up our records on her computer, her expression growing more concerned as she scrolled through the data. "Luke, there have been some unusual withdrawals from your joint savings account over the past 6 months. Large cash withdrawals, always when you weren't the one making them." "How large?" $1,500 here, $2,000 there. Always just under the amount that would trigger automatic notification to both account holders. My stomach dropped. "How much total?" Janet did some quick calculations. "Nearly $12,000. $12,000. Money I'd earned working overtime and weekend jobs. Money we'd been saving for the vacation Sierra kept talking about. Money that had apparently been funding her affair." "Can you print out the transaction history?" I asked. "Of course." "Luke, I have to ask, did you know about these withdrawals?" "No," I said grimly, "but I'm starting to get a picture of where the money went." Next, I drove to the Eastland Park Hotel in Portland, the one whose keycard I'd found in Sierra's coat pocket. The desk manager was a young woman named Ashley, who looked barely old enough to drink, but she was professional and helpful. "I need to verify some charges to my credit card," I explained, showing her my ID and the keycard. "My wife made reservations, but I want to make sure we weren't overcharged." Ashley pulled up the records. "Mr. Mathers, I show multiple reservations under your card over the past year. Always for a suite, always for 2 nights, always charged to the same credit card." "Multiple reservations?" 14 separate bookings. The most recent was last weekend. Last weekend, when Sierra was supposedly at a mandatory team-building retreat. "Can you print out the billing history?" "Certainly. I should mention, the reservations were always made by a woman who identified herself as Mrs. Pierce. She said she was using her husband's credit card." Mrs. Pierce. Sierra had been using Gavin's last name at hotels, playing house with my money. "Did you ever meet Mrs. Pierce in person?" Ashley nodded. "Several times. Blonde woman, very well dressed, usually came in with a tall man in expensive suits. They seemed very comfortable together, like regulars." I thanked Ashley and left with a stack of hotel receipts that documented Sierra's affair in excruciating detail. 14 weekends over the past year, each one costing between $800 and $1,200. Money that came from our joint account to pay for Sierra's romantic getaways with her boyfriend. The pattern was becoming clear. Sierra wasn't just cheating, she was stealing. She'd been systematically draining our savings to fund her relationship with Gavin, all while playing the loving wife at home. But I wasn't done gathering evidence. My next stop was TechFlow Solutions, where I had a lunch meeting with Nina Rodriguez, one of Sierra's co-workers. Terry had suggested I talk to Nina, saying she might have insights into the office dynamics. We met at a small cafe near the TechFlow building. Nina was attractive in an understated way. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, professional, but not flashy. The opposite of Sierra's polished, high-maintenance appearance. "I wasn't sure I should meet with you," she said after we'd ordered. "This feels like I'm betraying a colleague." "I understand your position," I said. "But I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I just want to understand what's been happening." Nina stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Sierra and Gavin think they're being discreet, but everyone knows. It's become a joke around the office, how obvious they are, how they think nobody notices. Terry mentioned they share hotel rooms at conferences. Among other things, they disappear together during lunch breaks, They work late together when everyone else goes home. They volunteer for out-of-town assignments together. Does management know? Nina laughed bitterly. Sierra is management, remember? And Gavin brings in too much revenue for anyone to care about his personal life. It's a boys' club at the top. They think his behavior is amusing. What about you? How does this affect the other employees? It creates a toxic environment, Nina said bluntly. Sierra plays favorites, gives the best assignments to people who don't question her relationship with Gavin. She's vindictive toward anyone who doesn't fall in line. Vindictive how? Bad performance reviews, being shut out of key meetings, and getting stuck on pointless projects. She made it clear that opposing her would permanently derail your career. I was getting a picture of Sierra that was completely different from the woman I'd married. At home, she was sweet and supportive. At work, she was a manipulative bully who used her position to protect her affair and punish anyone who threatened her. Nina, I said carefully, can I ask why you're willing to talk to me about this? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. Because Sierra destroyed my career, she said finally. I made the mistake of questioning one of her decisions in a staff meeting. Nothing dramatic, just a professional disagreement. But she took it personally. What happened? Suddenly I was getting the worst assignments, the impossible deadlines, the clients nobody else wanted to deal with. My performance reviews went from excellent to barely adequate. She's been systematically pushing me out. I'm sorry. The thing is, Nina continued, I'm not the only one. Sierra has a pattern of targeting people she sees as threats, women especially. She doesn't like competition. An idea was forming in my mind, a way to use Sierra's professional behavior against her. Nina, would you be willing to document some of these incidents? Dates, times, witnesses? Why? Because Sierra thinks she's untouchable. She thinks she can manipulate people without consequences. But bullies always make mistakes, and when they do, it's important to have evidence. Nina smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. You know what? Yes. I'd be happy to help with that. We spent another hour going over specific incidents, names, dates. Nina had been keeping detailed records of Sierra's behavior, partly for her own protection, and partly because she was hoping to file a complaint with HR, not realizing that Sierra was HR. By the time I left the cafe, I had a clear picture of who Sierra really was, not just an unfaithful wife, but a workplace bully who abused her position to protect her affair and punish her enemies. That evening, I met with Benny and Terry at my house to review all the evidence I'd gathered. We spread everything out on my dining room table: bank records, hotel receipts, photographs from the closet camera, Nina's documentation of workplace harassment. Man, Benny said, studying the hotel bills. She really took you for a ride. 14 weekends at fancy hotels, all on your dime. Nearly $20,000 total, I said, between the hotel bills and the cash withdrawals. Terry was examining the photographs from the closet camera. These are good quality. Timestamps, clear images, no question about what's happening. The question is, what do we do with all this? We destroy her, Benny said simply. She made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences. It's not that simple, I said. I want justice, not just revenge. I want everyone to understand what kind of person she really is. So what's the plan? I looked at the evidence spread across my table, proof of adultery, theft, workplace harassment, and systematic deception. Sierra had built her life on lies, but lies had a way of collapsing when exposed to sunlight. We're going to tell the truth, I said. All of it, to everyone who needs to hear it. Starting with, I smiled, and it probably wasn't a nice expression. Starting with Gavin's fiancée. Benny and Terry stared at me. Gavin's engaged? Terry asked. According to his social media, he proposed to Amanda Walsh 3 months ago. She's a kindergarten teacher in Portland. Seems like a nice girl. I bet she'd be very interested to know how her fiancé spends his lunch breaks. The room was quiet for a moment as the implications sank in. "Luke," Benny said slowly, "that's cold." "No," I replied. "What's cold is having an affair with a married woman while you're engaged to someone else. What's cold is stealing money from your lover's husband to pay for hotel rooms. What's cold is lying to everyone who trusts you." I gathered up the photographs and documents. Sierra and Gavin think they're playing a game where only I can get hurt. They're about to learn that everyone has consequences. Tuesday morning, I drove to Portland with a manila envelope full of evidence and a plan that would change several lives forever. Amanda Walsh taught at Riverside Elementary, a small school in a quiet neighborhood where children played on swings and teachers shaped young minds. She had no idea her fiancé was living a double life. I waited in the parking lot until school let out, then approached Amanda as she walked to her car. She was exactly what I'd expected from her social media photos, pretty in a wholesome way, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who worked with children. "Ms. Walsh," I said, "my name is Luke Mathers. I need to speak with you about Gavin Pierce." Her face lit up at the mention of his name. "Are you a friend of Gavin's? Are you here about the wedding?" "Not exactly," I said gently. "Could we talk privately? It's important." Something in my tone made her smile fade. "Is something wrong? Is Gavin hurt?" "Gavin's fine," I said, "but there are things about him you need to know." We sat in her car while I showed her the evidence: photographs of Gavin in my bedroom, hotel receipts with his name on them, documentation of his 2-year affair with my wife. Amanda's face went through the same progression of emotions I'd experienced: confusion, disbelief, recognition, devastation. "I don't understand," she whispered, staring at a photograph of Gavin kissing Sierra in our kitchen. "We're getting married in 6 months. We've been planning. We put a deposit on a venue." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Amanda was an innocent victim in this, just like I'd been. "I thought you deserved to know the truth before you made any permanent decisions." She was crying now, quiet tears that broke my heart. This woman had done nothing wrong except fall in love with the wrong man. "How long?" she asked. 2 years that I know of, probably since before you started dating." Amanda stared at the photographs for a long time, then carefully placed them back in the envelope. "Thank you," she said finally. "I know this couldn't have been easy for you." "What will you do?" She wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "I'm going to call off the engagement, tonight, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows why." "Amanda." "No," she said firmly. "I'm not going to protect him. I'm not going to make excuses or cover up his behavior. If he can lie to both of us for 2 years, he can face the consequences." I left Amanda in the school parking lot and drove back to Pine Ridge, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. Gavin's perfect life was about to implode, but an innocent woman had been hurt in the process. Sometimes justice was messy. That evening, my phone started ringing. First Gavin, then Sierra, then numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. Whatever chaos was unfolding, I wanted to let it build momentum before I got involved. Wednesday morning brought more calls, more messages. Sierra left increasingly desperate voicemails, begging me to call her back, claiming there had been a misunderstanding. Gavin's messages were angry, threatening, demanding to know what I'd told Amanda. I deleted them all without listening to the complete messages. Instead, I focused on the next phase of my plan. I'd exposed the affair to Gavin's fiancé, but Sierra still had her job, her reputation, her position of power at TechFlow. That needed to change. I called Nina and asked her to meet me for coffee. "Amanda Walsh called off her engagement," I told her when we sat down. "The whole thing is falling apart." Nina's eyes widened. "You told Gavin's fiancé about the affair?" "She deserved to know the truth, just like you deserve justice for what Sierra's done to your career." "What do you mean?" I pulled out copies of the evidence I'd gathered, not just about the affair, but about Sierra's pattern of workplace harassment and abuse of power. I want to file a formal complaint against Sierra with the State Labor Board, I said. Hostile work environment, abuse of authority, retaliation against employees who question her decisions. Luke, Sierra is the HR department. Who would investigate a complaint against her? The State Labor Board operates independently of company HR. They investigate violations of employment law, and what Sierra's been doing is definitely illegal. Nina studied the documents I'd prepared. You've been thorough. I'm a contractor. I don't start tearing down a structure until I understand exactly how it's built. What do you need from me? Your testimony, documentation of specific incidents, names of other employees who've been targeted. Nina was quiet for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Let's do it. We spent the next 2 hours preparing a comprehensive complaint against Sierra, documenting her pattern of harassment, favoritism, and abuse of power. Nina provided specific examples, dates, witnesses. By the time we finished, we had a case that would be impossible to ignore. One more thing, I said, as we prepared to leave. I want you to know that when this comes out, Sierra's going to retaliate. She'll try to make your life miserable. She's already made my life miserable, Nina replied. At least now I'm fighting back. Thursday morning, I filed the complaint with the State Labor Board and sent copies to TechFlow's board of directors. By afternoon, Sierra had been suspended pending investigation, and Gavin had been placed on administrative leave. My phone rang constantly. Sierra, her parents, her sister, even some of her friends. I ignored them all. Let them scramble, let them panic, let them try to figure out how their carefully constructed lies had collapsed so quickly. Friday evening, Jennifer called. Luke, she said when I finally answered, we need to talk. About what? About my sister, about what you're doing to her. I'm not doing anything to her, I said calmly. I'm simply telling the truth about what she did to me. You're destroying her life. No, Jennifer. Sierra destroyed her own life when she chose to have an affair for 2 years. I'm just making sure everyone understands what really happened. She made a mistake. She made a choice, I interrupted. Every day for 2 years, she chose to lie to me. She chose to steal from our joint account to pay for hotel rooms with her boyfriend. She chose to abuse her position at work to protect her affair. Those weren't mistakes, they were calculated decisions. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, almost detached, as if I were listing facts from a report instead of dismantling the narrative everyone seemed so eager to soften. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out weeks ago, leaving something colder and clearer in its place. Across the line, I could hear Jennifer breathing, waiting for me to soften, to add a caveat, to leave room for forgiveness. I didn't. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd pulled the phone away, if she was rubbing her temples or staring at a wall, trying to reconcile the sister she loved with the reality I was describing. What do you want from her? Nothing, I said honestly. And it surprised me how true it felt when I said it out loud. I don't want her money, I don't want her apologies, I don't want her explanations. I just want her to face the consequences of her actions. I paused, letting that land. Wanting nothing, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. And then what? When you've destroyed her completely, what happens next? The question wasn't accusatory, but it carried a quiet plea, as if she hoped I would admit this was all about vengeance, that once the damage was done, I'd feel empty and regretful. Then I move on with my life, and she figures out how to live with hers. I didn't know exactly what moving on looked like yet, but I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't pretending this hadn't happened. Luke, please, she's my sister. She's family. She was my wife, I said. The words came out heavier than I expected. She was supposed to be my family too. Ask her what that meant to her when she was sharing hotel rooms with Gavin. I pictured those rooms without wanting to, neutral spaces paid for with money that had once been meant for groceries, vacations, a future. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about Jennifer's question. What did happen next? The house was quiet in that hollow way it only became late at night, the refrigerator humming softly, the clock over the stove marking time with unnecessary precision. I'd exposed Sierra's affair, ended Gavin's engagement, gotten Sierra suspended from her job. The truth was out, justice was being served. But what came after revenge? When the noise died down and there was no one left to confront, what filled the space? I didn't have an answer yet, and for once, I allowed myself not to force one. For now, it was enough to know that Sierra and Gavin were finally facing consequences for their actions, that the lies had been exposed, that everyone understood what kind of people they really were. Not monsters, just ordinary people who made selfish choices and paid for them. The phone rang again, Sierra's number on the display. My first instinct was to let it ring, to preserve the silence I'd just found. But something told me this was the last loose end, the final conversation that needed to happen. This time, I answered. "What do you want?" I said without preamble. "Luke, please," she sobbed. The sound was raw, desperate, and for a split second it tugged at something old and familiar inside me. "Can we meet? Can we talk? I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said. I kept my tone level, careful not to turn it into another argument. "I understand perfectly. You wanted Gavin, you took him. You wanted money for your affair, you stole it. You wanted to keep your job while harassing your coworkers, so you abused your position. It's all very clear." Saying it out loud stripped it of any remaining ambiguity. "It wasn't like that." "Sierra," I said gently, and I meant it. "It's over. The marriage is over. Your job is probably over. Your reputation is definitely over. You made your choices, now you live with them." I wasn't punishing her. I was simply refusing to carry what was hers to carry. "I love you," she whispered. It sounded like a reflex, something she'd said so many times before that it came out automatically. "No," I said. "You loved what I provided. Security, money, someone to pay the bills while you figured out what you really wanted. But you never loved me enough to be honest with me." That was the truth I'd spent 2 years circling. "Luke." I hung up and turned off my phone. The sudden quiet felt deliberate, chosen. Outside, the October evening was crisp and clear. The air smelled faintly of fallen leaves and distant fireplaces. I could see Mrs. Dunning in her garden, probably hoping for some drama to observe, her curiosity thinly veiled behind pruning shears. The Morrison house across the street had their lights on, a normal family having a normal dinner, unaware or uninterested in the collapse that had just occurred next door. Everything looked the same as it had a week ago, but everything was different. My marriage was over, my wife was gone, my future was uncertain. Yet beneath the uncertainty was a strange sense of relief, like stepping outside after being in a cramped room for too long. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The lies were finished. The truth was out. Whatever came next, it would be built on solid ground instead of shifting sand. I opened a beer and sat on my porch, watching the sun set over Pine Ridge, the sky slowly fading from gold to deep blue. I let myself imagine small, undefined possibilities, quiet mornings, honest conversations, a life without constant suspicion. I wasn't planning everything yet. I was just allowing the idea of a next chapter to exist. It would be different from what I'd expected, but it would be honest. And after 2 years of living a lie, honesty felt like the most valuable thing in the world.